Hey gang, Kevin here, Life22. And it's been a while since we've done a podcast from down here. It's the old Quinn's Wake, and I just happened to be passing through and I had a spot. Well, I needed a nice quiet spot towards the end of my day. And I know I'm a little late coming up with this podcast, but it's kind of a call to action. If you're around Olean tonight, your presence is required over at the zoning board meeting. I wanted to kind of speak my piece to this. I got a bunch of FOIL documentation in relation to a zoning board case that's coming up, and I think it's ridiculous. So here's part of the issue with me making these comments. One of the issues that I always am hesitant about is that people are very emotional, and even though they say that they're non-biased and nonpartisan, they have a tendency to hold that against you. So now it's like, well, no, I wasn't being biased towards you, blah, blah, blah. That means nothing. And it's like, it's easy to just pretend like something doesn't bother somebody, but they behind the scenes, they're actually they are harboring a grudge because of you stated your opinion to them, and they're never going to let it go, which poses an issue because, listen, I do construction in this town. I live in this town. I own property in this town. And so the issue I have is if you speak up against the zoning board, and then you have to go in front of the zoning board. I have a bunch of things at my house I would love to do. And in the future, if I have the expendable income, I would love to add a driveway in the front of my house and a curb cut like that, because of setbacks and all this other stuff would require me to go in front of the zoning board. And so I know the zoning board members aren't, forever and always, but they do change. But if they don't change, and I'm speaking my piece on a zoning board issue that has come up today, will somebody hold it against me in the future? And that's, as much as people say that they don't hold, grudges or biased or whatever, could they be saying that because they're honest about it and they're not actually holding a grudge? Or could a case of mine be denied in the future because of that? I always worry about stuff with small town politics like that, because I've been on the Common Council. I've been there when people say that they don't have an issue with a certain person or blah, blah, blah. And then behind the scenes, they're like, no, I have a big issue with that person and blah, blah, blah. And luckily we had this excuse to, deny something or whatever. And it's like, well, that's not how I voted. I could give two craps about the person. You know what I mean? You could spit in my face right before the meeting. I still have to vote on the merit, not because of whatever. And I've seen all sorts of stuff like that. You'd hope that people would be honest and truthful. Now, that disclaimer said, I have a big issue with zoning in general. I am a constitutionalist. I am a big property rights guy. I love my private property. I love it. I love all the private property that I own. The beautiful thing about America is when you own property, you have the right to pretty much do whatever you want. Now, you can't just no warning, just, somebody steps on their property to, deliver the mail and you could just murder them. No, you can't do that, right? You can't do certain things, but it's my private property, right? So I can do what I want. And I think discussion should be had because, listen, I've gone through code enforcement training, stuff like that. I do my continuing education every year. I'm a certified code enforcement official. And to a degree, the codes have merit. You watch enough videos and testimonials of kids going up like candles in 1800s boarding schools, and you're like, you know what? Okay, I can understand why you should be able to infringe on somebody's right. That's still what it is. It's an infringement on somebody's right. Somebody has the right to build a home, and you are creating an infringement by imposing a code. But for the betterment and the safety of all humans around, you make these things. And I can make concessions for stuff like that. But there are concessions I can't get behind. I don't like HOAs. I don't like any of those things, right? So for the fact that you can say, what if I want my entire yard to be driveway? I want my entire front of my house, or the side of my house, to be a driveway approach, right? I want a 45-foot driveway approach. It's my goddamn property. I can do whatever I want. And that's my philosophy on it. And then you can make the argument that, you're reducing on-street parking. Well, guess what? I don't give a flying shit about your street. You know what I mean? It's also my street. It's also in front of my house, And so to me, you have less of an argument to say that I can't turn my entire my entire side of my house into a subway or a driveway approach, and more so rights saying that, well, yeah, you can't go 4 stories in wood without having the building sprinklered, or 3 stories or more without it being sprinklered unless it's grandfathered, right? And then they still would like, if they would still like some kind of concession or something just to show that people are safe. Carbon monoxide detectors, right? Like things like that, things that, there is no grandfathership to carbon monoxide and smoke detectors. But then there are things in the code that they automatically, they just know that your private property rights are very important, and they understand that your beliefs and your religion and all that other stuff. So like where the building code says you have to build a house with, like running water and electric. And the exemption to the electric rule is if it's owner occupied and you choose to not have electric. And that's a very plausible case, because what happens when you are like a Mennonite and you're Amish and you don't believe that electricity should be in your home? Things like that. Or it's a hunting camp, right? Maybe there's not electricity where you are, or you have to hook up a generator and you only need it to run while you're there, right? So maybe you don't need it. That said, like, carbon monoxide, for example, you listen to the, how it got created. I think it was Amanda's Law. It was I believe it was based out of a family in like Clarence or Buffalo, where they, the little girls had a sleepover and there was a crack in the heat exchanger of the furnace. And they went in the room and 3 of the girls were really sick and the other 4 were dead. And that's depressing and that's sad. And I feel for those people. And I agree that there's certain safety measures that should be taken when it comes to the building code. But for the most part, if I meet certain setbacks, right, to have my campfire in my backyard so I can have a fire and drink a beer and be an American, right, you shouldn't be able to infringe on that. Well, I'm sorry, we only have certain times of the year. What if it causes a wildfire? Like, okay, well, I get that. But I'm also like, I can give you that, but also like, well, it can only be this and it can only be that. We start going down a rabbit hole with all these discussions, right? And here's the issue: is there's too many restrictions on these rights. There's too many restrictions. That's the issue. It's my property. I don't care if it's my religion or not. If I want to slaughter a goat in my front yard, I will do so, because it's my property. And for you to tell me that I can't have a goat inside your city, that's an issue. I know this is a long time coming, because I saw most recently at a common council meeting, they were talking about expanding the number of chickens that you could have. I've got a bunch of neighbors that would like, in a neighborhood, couple blocks away, that have a vacant lot that one of them bought, and she has chickens, and she has chickens and she'd like to get more, but she would overload the limit that the city allows on her. But she's got neighbors that are willing to maybe not invest their time, but invest money into providing her with a coop and additional chickens and feed. And in exchange, they would get eggs every month, almost like a co-op. It's like the neighborhood gardens, but for chickens. And I think that's a great idea. I think if neighbors can come together and come up with collective things like that, but then you have these stupid restrictions. Well, it's her property. She should be able to do what she wants. If she wants every chicken, if she wants to buy that lot and fill it with chickens standing room only, so that they're just all there. They're very uncomfortable, but they're all penned up in a line, like those like chicken run, okay? Just in rows and rows and rows of chickens. So many that it's hard for her to feed them. Guess what? It's her property. It's her property. Even the chickens are her property. They are personal possessions. They're not human beings. They don't have the same rights as human beings. And so with that said, I'm not saying go out there and cause animal cruelty. I'm not saying go slaughter goats in your front yard, but it is our rights as Americans to be able to do these different types of things. And all of this to say is there is a nice gentleman that lives nearby a rental property. One of the first properties I lived at when I moved to Olean. I bought it off my father. And now it's a rental property of mine. And I try my best to make sure all my rental properties are kept up and keep their value. And it helps me out for my investment, right? Why would I let a house just rot apart? And why would I pick bad tenants to move in and then disrupt the neighborhood? And it drops my property values, it drops everybody else's. But across the street, and especially, and I'm sure most of you have noticed with All Family August, we've been doing a lot of neighborhood watch stuff. And there's a lot of drug activity, a lot of homeless, a lot of people coming into our city. And it's not a cool thing. It's not good. It is not good at all. So when you have a neighbor that is just, I don't know, outside all day long, or when he's not working. So this particular individual, he works, and when he gets out of work, because he raises a family, and when he works, I believe his wife goes to work. and then someone's going to watch the kids. So he's kind of like watching the kids. And so like he plays that role, but he also details cars. And he's done this for a long time. And he's always a watchful eye. He always sees crimes, he reports them, you know what I mean? He's always out on the street when other people are not. And there is one neighbor in particular who does not like this and files complaints because she doesn't believe that people should be able to use their leaf blowers, and she's sick and tired of people using their lawn mowers. Listen, I've read all the emails to the alderman. It's bad enough that I'm forced to have to listen to the lawn mowers and the leaf blowers and weed whackers of all my neighbors. Listen, I know the lady. I used to mow her lawn when I was in high school. I'm surprised she didn't call code enforcement on me. Kevin is operating his lawnmower at my house without a permit, without during a, I worked it into my schedule because I was a young kid. I had school. I'm surprised that those things didn't happen. But you know what? She didn't call it in on me for the simple fact that I was mowing her lawn. It benefited her. Guess what? I shouldn't have to go outside. I shouldn't have to go outside and listen to her peace and quiet. I mean, the same right that she says that she has to quiet habitation of her home is the same right that I have to noisy habitation of mine. Just playing devil's advocate here, and it's a legitimate reason. Nobody should be able to tell me that I can't live the way that I want to live. Well, I mean, as long as I'm not infringing on the rights of others, right? And you don't have the right to not have to listen to the neighbors mow a lawn. You know how you get that right? You know how you get that? That's not even a right. You know how you get that privilege of not having to listen to somebody mow the lawn? You own a property far, far away from other people. If you don't want to listen to other people, then don't live next to other people. Or at least because there's no such thing as not living next to somebody, right? Because your property line might go for 5 miles, but on the other side of that is somebody else. So that's next to them, regardless of how wide your property is. Now, you might not live right on top of them, and that's probably what she's preferring. So, sorry you've lived in this neighborhood for 20 some odd years, 40 some odd years, but tough noogies. There's a guy out there running a business, trying to raise a family, trying to make ends meet. And during COVID, these people had no problem promoting all over Facebook. I saw it. My wife has a Cricut. Does she run an at-home business? Because she would make decorations here and there. And we'd sell them right here at this coffee shop when it was a coffee shop. It's just one of those things. If she sold her wares here, is she an at-home business? She doesn't really do it anymore. I have her work for one of my other businesses, but it's one of those, if she was still doing it, would she have, what would it be? Where would we be at with this? Would she have to get an at-home variance from the zoning board to run how many thousands of women or men in this town are running at-home businesses, Cricut machines, watching people's kids? Oh, watching people's kids isn't a business. I get that. I've gotten that excuse when people said you're not babysitting when it's your kids, but that doesn't apply when you're watching somebody else's kids. You're babysitting. If a babysitter comes to my house, do I need to get a variance because I'm hiring a professional? Do I have to get a variance when the kid comes to mow my lawn? Or is it because it's a service-based business and it's not a permanent situation? But what happens when the kid is permanently watching other people's kids at their parents' home or at their own home or their apartment? You drop the kids off. This lady watches her kids. No, because America was founded on this. There was no zoning permits needed when somebody wanted to hang the shingle up in their backyard and say, hey, listen, I'm gonna be the blacksmith. The blacksmith down the road died. He doesn't have any kids. I'm gonna be making the horseshoes for all the horses out of my garage here. I trained off of them when I was younger, and now that I'm the only game in town, I'm gonna be the blacksmith. Guess what? You didn't need a goddamn zoning permit. You didn't need zoning for that. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And so now they're making him go in front of the zoning board. And there's just a huge issue in my mind with having to go there for your business. Every one of the rental properties I own, are those considered a business? Some people consider them a business. I profit from them. What's the definition of a business? And the definition of things are constantly changing. There's no definition of business in the Constitution of the United States, as far as I'm aware. So, at what point is your business protected? Because they'll say that you have no right to commerce, right? You have no right to that. You don't have the right to go get a job. And that's why communism is able to sneak into our society so quickly. It is just ridiculous that a small family is trying to make ends meet is going through such a depravity. And this, just what our city is doing, and then how everybody is so closed-minded to small business owners. Guess what? Yes, it is good to have a ton of jobs where people get W-2s, but you should be promoting, like, most of your citizens should be self-employed, should be working for themselves. That is what we're supposed to strive for. We're not supposed to strive for people working for other people. That's it. Like, that's the American dream. The American dream is owning your own business. That's it. Yes, I employ people, but guess what? Like, if they had side businesses, if they did their own thing, I would not have an issue with that. I mean, obviously, unless it's like a direct competition, I might have a slight issue with that, but it is what it is. I mean, our goal as a society is supposed to be promoting everybody to be their own, to do their own thing. Take light out of there. It should not be the goal for every American to be a W-2 employee. It's probably going to be most Americans. Not all Americans will be custodians, but a majority of them will have minimum wage and low income jobs. That's just the way it is. And it's not always the same people. Those people eventually make their way up to the top. You're born poor and you're raised, you know what I mean? Like, most people, by the time, if they're born poor, the statistic is that, they're, by the time that they die, most of them are pretty well off, because you migrate out of income brackets as you get older. So I just think it is ridiculous, and that we as a community have to stand together to fight these stupid arbitrary zoning laws that exist. I don't think it's constitutional that they could have them. I think that the zoning board should be abolished. Nothing personally against any of the zoning board members. I've sat in front of them for clients before, most recently actually. I understand why somebody thought they should exist. Not the people, but the board itself. I understand why somebody thought they should exist. I don't agree with that. I think it's an infringement on our rights. I play nice when I'm there, but I do feel obligated to speak my mind in regards to this issue. And like I said earlier, I hope that this is not held against me, but, it's how I feel. I'm an American citizen. I'm allowed to feel certain ways, and I'm also allowed to stand up for other people when I feel like their voice is being muffled by the boot of government that is on the back of their throat, extinguishing their voice. And so I will stand alongside them, because the government's boot is only so big. The government wears one size shoe. And you remember that. And I will stand right there, because it might step on my neck and it might step on theirs, but it can't step on all our necks. We have to stand together so our voice can be heard, so we can make a presence, and us small business owners need to stand up for each other, regardless if you have multiple employees or you're just some guy washing cars at the end of your driveway in your off hours from your 9-to-5 job to try to be able to buy food and clothes for your kids. And also, it comes to mind that somebody had just recently mentioned it's humorous that this one individual is calling in complaints when she runs on a business out of her home, is what I've heard. Counseling, therapy, some sort of like professional service of that sort. So it's funny that she can run that out of her home, but because she's not running a shop vac or a garden hose or whatever, that this is. It's depressing. It's depressing, and don't worry, folks. You don't have to be depressed for very much longer, because we're here fighting. It should give you some gusto. The fact that we're going up there to defend one of our community members from having their kids go hungry, they're not be able to buy back to school clothes or shoes because the extra income, and which I would almost hold the city accountable for all the fact that he has not been able to operate in the last 3 months. Man. That's just ridiculous. Like, hey kids, like, we can either not eat or you can have back to school clothes. Like, I don't see how that's fair to a family that all they want to do is work. All they want to do is raise their kids and their family. We should not be punishing that kind of behavior. And then the state of New York comes through and says, oh yeah, if you're homeless, you don't want to work, don't worry, you don't have to. Well, that's bullshit too. All right. Well, I needed to get this rant out. I wish I had gotten it to you sooner. There is a call to action tonight. Please show up at the zoning board meeting. It is at 5:45 at the city building. Even if this message to come to our invite is dated, please like and subscribe, because this really just tells you where we're at as Americans and where we stand. So, and who we stand for and with. So we'll see you guys next time on Life22.